wanted to inform you about that. My name is Ritika Shaw. I'm your moderator this evening. I volunteer with Women in AI as a partnerships project manager. Women in AI is a nonprofit do tank. We are working towards gender inclusive AI that benefits global society. Our mission is to increase female representation and participation in artificial intelligence. We are a community driven initiative. We bring empowerment, knowledge, and active collaboration via education, research, events, and blogging. Our event today is Respectful and Responsible AI. As you know, artificial intelligence is no longer a dream, but something that is touching all aspects of our life. It's a powerful tool which is helping us reduce cost, reduce downtime. It's augmenting the capabilities of differentially abled individuals. It's everywhere. And to quote Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, which is why we have two industry leaders who will share their knowledge and experiences with us on how to be responsible with the use of AI. As we settle in and more of us join in, I would like to invite my colleague Janaya. She's going to tell us about a very exciting and upcoming event for Women in AI.
All right,
Janaya?
thank you very much for that, Ritika. Thank you for the intro. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. So just taking a few minutes to let you know that I'm going to share my screen. As part of the Y Accelerate program, we are organizing an amazing hackathon on between June 4th and 6th. And it is going to be focused on having teams of people coming together, innovators, some from the Y Accelerate program, and other people who are interested in sharing their entrepreneurial skills, their creativity, and their innovative minds to create and develop a pitch for startup that would be aimed at solving one of the UN's SDG goals, and also with a specific focus on the goal of education. So it's set to be a really fun weekend. You're going to come network, learn a lot, make some connections. Our applications are open for participants. If you are interested in mentoring one of the teams and sharing your expertise, we would love to have you. And I'm going to put the links to that down below. Our theme, another theme that we have is zero exclusion. And that means everyone is welcome to the hackathon. And entrepreneurship, technology, using AI, machine learning, or data skills in the service of creating that pitch for the startup. So I will put the links in the chat for the mentorship applications, for the participant applications. And if you want to be a sponsor or know someone who may be interested in sponsoring, please help us spread the word. And I'll also put the link to our website where you can learn a little bit more. Our advisor, program advisor, Sunny Zhang is here. And I see another member, Kira. If you want to add anything that I may have missed, please feel free to go ahead or introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Kira. I'm volunteering with kind of the social media outreach and whatever else I can help with the hackathon. I don't have anything else to add that I can think of.
All right, thanks, Kira. All right. So I'll just put those in the chat. Thanks, Ritika.
Thank you, Janaya. Thank you for that. I would like to bring the attention of the audience to our chat window, where Janaya will be posting the links to registrations and some more details about Hackathon. If you can join it, it's a really exciting event. Now, I would also encourage the audience to add any questions you might have for our speakers in the chat window. We will be having a Q&A sessions once both our speakers finish presenting. Our first speaker for the evening is Dr. Karina Alexanyan. She has over 15 years of experience directing research and program initiatives at the intersection of social science, information technology, media, and education. She consults with leading academic and social impact organizations on issues related to responsible and respectful technology. She worked with Stanford, Harvard, and Columbia University, as well as organizations such as Partnership on AI, All Tech is Human, and To Be Alliance, the me2be.org. Karina's academic research explores how our values manifest in the tools we create and how they shape us in turn. Her professional work applies these insights towards developing and leveraging technologies for social benefit. Over to you, Karina.
Thank you so much. It's always so weird to hear your bio announced. Ritika, you were cutting out a little bit for me. Was anybody else having tech stuff? I just want to make sure that it's going to be smooth for people. So
I think it was my internet. I think I'm having a, maybe it was mine.
Okay, so
was everyone okay?
It's just my
Karina
bio.
is okay.
Yeah. If anyone's having problems while I'm talking, maybe just raise your hands and or just mention something in chat and let me know. I'm going to go through kind of a fast presentation with a lot of information, and I'm just going to barrel through it pretty quickly. And then if people have questions, we'll post this, make this available on our website later. And I'm happy to talk to people afterwards about it all. But essentially, let me take a minute and share my screen. And then put it in slideshow. Okay, how's that? Everybody see it okay? Good?
Yep.
Okay. So what I work with an organization called the Me2Be Alliance, and we're focused on respectful technology relationship. And so we're kind of, I'll be talking about what that means essentially. And we've created a framework and a model, and I'll be talking about that real quick. At issue is that all the technology tools that we engage with, whether it's our phones or the browsers or products and services online, we know something is going on behind the scenes in terms of the way that they are collecting our data and how we're interacting with them, but we are not really empowered as individuals to really understand what's going on. And in addition, there's no universal standard for responsible and respectful treatment of people by technology. So the work that the Me2Be Alliance does is it's taking these kind of amorphous understandings of behavior and interaction and trying to quantify them and measure them and then create a standard and then evaluate and audit companies and services and products based on that standard. So that's what we do. And what we've done essentially is we're focused on the behavior of the person with the technology, not the behavior of the company so much, not the development of the technology so much, but really on the interaction. And we've taken the healthy human relationships and kind of translated them to interaction with technology and tools, products and services. So our feeling is that tech should treat you like a good friend, or at least a polite stranger, and that it should be respectful. And what we're looking at is, what we've done is we've taken the metrics from human relationships and interpersonal relationships and kind of translated them to products and services. Things like respective boundaries, anonymous by default, transparency, communication, redress of harms, and we've kind of worked to translate them to relationships. So what does this look like? It looks like a lot of things, and here we have a super busy slide that normally would take me about 10 minutes to describe, but I will go through it quickly for you. Essentially, let's see, can you guys see my cursor? Yeah, so there's a person. What this slide is talking about is your relationship with your phone, your browser, your website that you're visiting, application. There's a legal relationship that you have when you sign the privacy agreements with the companies that own those things. But there's also kind of a personal relationship that you have when you use it. And right here in particular, the ways that the products are collecting data about you and the non-existent or very little existent transparency and understanding that you have over what data is being collected and how it's being shared. What we also have done is we've taken this arc of a human relationship that kind of goes from acquaintance to build up to commitment to potentially deterioration and end, and we've translated that to our relationships with products and services. So we've kind of moved from what that looks like in the physical world, from I'm about to go into a store to I'm buying things and I'm returning to that store to I'm leaving the store and I'm not going there anymore. And the way that you are anonymous when you enter a physical space until you've chosen, you have the choice to kind of turn over your credit card and give your information, but you're really anonymous a lot of the time. Whereas in the digital world, that's not exactly the case. And the minute you begin interacting, there's tracking that's going on with you. And the me to be, me stands for me's, like individuals, and B is businesses. And this idea on the purple row right here is about what we kind of recommend that relationship should look like in terms of privacy and permissions and reporting problems and kind of getting all your information back when you end the relationship. So this arc here is about, there's two areas to pay attention to in this also very busy slide. One is the dark gray and the light gray. So in theory, you are anonymous until you have made this kind of commitment, like to sign up for an account and be remembered and recognized and responded to. But in reality, right, and then you can be anonymous again when you've deleted your account. But in reality, you're kind of being remembered and recognized and identified throughout the entire process, kind of from the moment that you have engaged with the platform or the application or whatever. And so our focus, that's kind of the core of what we're talking about in terms of what respectful technology is versus just responsible. And we've taken all this information and packaged it into standards and specifications that we will then, and we're new, and we've been gathering this information from a lot of experts and individuals and organizations, and we've begun auditing and evaluating groups based on this. We've just published a report on educational apps and finding that 60% of the apps that we reviewed were sharing student data with third parties. And these are apps that were built by companies that are designed to deal with student data and children's data. And so that's kind of an issue. I can share there's been some coverage of that I can share with you. But the short version is that, our goal is to have an objective way to measure technology behavior and to empower people so that they have a sense of how technology is treating them and have some recourse. The key takeaways is that when we talk about respectful treatment of technology, that our focus is on behavior. It's more than just about privacy and how your data is used. It's about the, transparency and communication and recourse and default to anonymity and privacy. And for product developers, we ask that or recommend that you start early and you start thinking about this element of respectful engagement from the start. And really our underlying philosophy is that this behavior is good, not just for individuals, but also for businesses in terms of the kinds of relationship they will have with their clients. And that's it. Thank you. I hope that wasn't too fast.
No, Thank you for that. Thank you, Karina, for sharing these insights and sharing what respectful technology means and getting a sense of how technology treats us. Thank you for that. I would like to invite the audience to share any questions or comments you have for Karina in chat. And I would like to start introducing our next speaker. She is Mona Sloane. She's a sociologist working on inequality and in the context of AI design and policy. She's a senior researcher at NYU Center for Responsible AI and adjunct professor at NYU Tandon. Mona is a technology editor at Public Books and a fellow at Government Lab. Mona currently also serves as a principal investigator at Procurement Roundtables Project, a collaboration that is focusing on innovating AI procurement to center equality and justice. Mona leads the Public Interest Technology Convention and Career Fair project that looks to bring together students and organizations building up the public interest technology space. Mona has written for The Guardian, MIT Technology Review, Frankfurter, 10 Medium, and other outlets. Over to you, Mona.
Thank you so much. And it's such a pleasure to be here. I just want to give a big shout out to your organization. I think it's fantastic. And I feel very honored to share the space with you today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of look at the stuff that Karina spoke about from a slightly different angle, from a qualitative angle. So I am a sociologist, I'm a qualitative researcher, and I'm interested in sort of the messy things and the messy bits and the gray areas of the intersection of society and technology. And what I'll be talking about today is a research project that I led over the summer called Terra Incognita. And I will share my screen, but I will invite you to click the link that I put in the chat, which is the Miro board, a very curated Miro board that we put together for the launch of the project. But let me return to my script. I wrote a script. That's kind of how I roll as an academic, so apologies. But here we go. So I will be talking about the social construction of safety and security today. And that sort of really feeds into or feeds from the research that we've conducted. As I said, I'll be talking about the Terra Incognita New York City research project, which really was concerned with how the digital city of New York City emerged during the pandemic summer of 2020. You may remember, a very special time in the United States, a very special time around the globe, but in the city particularly. So just to sort of start with a summary, one of our most important findings is that the digital city, in fact, reinforces the physical city. And I encourage all of you who work with data in artificial intelligence to keep that in mind when you consider, looking at data as objective knowledge, for example. Now, the finding that the digital city reinforces the physical city really rings hollow without acknowledging and reckoning with the genocide, with the erasure and the forced removal of the peoples on whose land this city, New York City, was built. New York City, with all its vibrancy and diversity, very much remains a colonial space, and it is imperative to build mindfulness of our participation in this colonial space, virtual or physical, and to acknowledge that the city was built on the unceded land of the Lenape peoples, and I acknowledge that I'm currently located on that land. Committing to dismantling the violent legacies of settler colonialism also means committing to the Black Lives Matter movement and the ongoing project to tackle white privilege and systemic racism in our city, in our communities, and in our institutions. And for me, that primarily means the academy. I really hope that the Terra Incognita project, in whatever small part, can be received with such intentions, and also as a contribution to this commitment. So everything I say, I hope, can be read in that context. Now, over a year ago, we all went into the first lockdown here in New York City. The city was facing really some of the highest infection and fatality rates in the world. Our life here in New York City rapidly changed, as did our relationship to digital platforms and also digital infrastructures. The COVID-19 outbreak and the prescribed isolation, which we are sort of still find ourselves in a very abrupt way, moved most of our social interactions online. And I'm sure you all know very well the very day that you went into lockdown. Most people can remember, and they would say March 13, March 14, 2020, around that time frame. Have a very specific memory. You'll probably exactly know where you were when you realized. Now, this digital move made people take deeper roots locally, connecting them more to their neighborhoods through physical presence, but also more local social interaction, albeit online. In this sense, the digital opened up a door to a wider world, and yet the digital was mostly employed to deepen local communities. As this shift happened, we saw the escalated impact of well-known physical and digital issues, among them the rise of private infrastructure, racialized policing of public space, the digital divide, harassment disproportionately impacted communities and individuals, political polarization, and so on. These occurred along the intersecting fault lines of race, class, gender, age, religion, sexuality, and more. Again, the biggest revelation of terra incognita in New York City is the digital city, for better and for worse, mirrors the physical city. It mirrored existing divisions. For example, the lack of broadband access mapped onto the pandemic-specific geography of risk and inequality. More affluent neighborhoods and communities here in New York were able to shelter in place, while our poorer communities, themselves within majority communities of color, were not really in lockdown in the same sense. They continued to be outside as frontline workers, and thus were really disproportionately put at risk for contracting the virus. Also, existing issues of discrimination and underrepresentation were exacerbated further and affected fundamental elements of social life, ranging from schooling to work. And as an educator, I was on the front line and witnessed that myself. At the same time, however, and this is really where we start our journey, we saw radically scaled experiments in virtual community and public space building across the city, across communities, and across practices. We studied these new digital physical spaces that were public and that felt public in different kinds of ways through the use of digital ethnography. Digital ethnography is a methodology of qualitative research that you use in digital space, whereby the site that you engage with, the thing that you look at, the people that you look at, the social practices that you look at, may be composed around a singular belief, a network of dozens or even thousands of different belief patterns, of social customs, of actions, and so on. So the thing that bounds your field site together can be something like exercising or worshiping or shopping or doing yoga or cooking or even walking. I'll get back to that in a minute. We studied a whole range of digital spaces and communities across all 5 boroughs of New York City, among them a Latinx poetry cafe, a synagogue, a senior home, a running club, a mutual aid group, and many more. We learned from our study that there are 9 elements that make up New York City's digital public space: curation, membership, publicness, safety, locality, affordances, infrastructure, intimacy, and temporality. And I'm gonna give you a brief sort of download on all of them, and then I'm gonna say a few more words on safety specifically, because I promised that that would be what I was gonna talk about today. Now, curation refers to the targeted programming and design of online events that people engage in. People were really very much focused on maintaining a sense of normalcy in these extraordinary times. What was really important as part of that was the role of being a moderator, which had a lot to do with having power over digital space, directing and controlling the flow of activity and interaction. in that digital space. Membership refers to implicit and explicit rules about who could come into these spaces. It had also a lot to do with identity, with both individual and group identity, and it also served as a platform for constituting a sense of belonging to a particular community or a neighborhood in that group stronger. Publicness just refers to a sense of being in public in a similar way in which we are now, not in private, but in public. We all know what that means in a physical public space. We all know what it means to take public transport, to be in a public park, and so on. But platforms often confounded boundaries of public and private, which could raise really interesting and new questions around politics. So for example, now I am in a very private space. I'm in my bedroom, in fact, where my desk is located, and yet I am in public. Safety or feeling safe was really a necessary condition for digital public space to emerge. It was connected to the feeling of being welcome, to the feeling of belonging. However, that feeling continually changed, and people also very much talked about physical safety, especially, of course, in the context of the pandemic and the virus. Locality refers to the heightened significance of the actual place people were in. Daily connections became more dense, they became more localized, and they also expanded geographically. Events and social spaces online allow people not in New York to participate remotely, causing digital public spaces to become comprised of multiple geographic connections. And that ranged from worshiping to public events where people actually felt closer to one another through the digital space. Affordances of the technologies that people used really refers to new possibilities of connecting and expressing themselves. For example, using the Zoom chat in a particular way. So I'm just going to check ours. It's a fair, there are questions. So we said the rule before, questions will be put into the chat. There are announcements. The chat in Zoom is used in very different ways by different communities. So for example, in the synagogue, in the context of the fairly formal social practice of Shabbat service, the Zoom chat was kind of the announcement board. This is where, the hymns would be posted, or where formal announcements would be made about who's getting married, things to know about activities that will happen soon. It was completely different in the Poetry Cafe, where it was an extremely informal space where people very deeply connected to one another and sent messages of encouragement, applause, intimate messages that were very vulnerable about what they were experiencing. So very different ways. And similarly, you can use the camera in different ways. So the affordances of these technologies were a very important element. Infrastructure refers to the uneven distribution of infrastructure and of maintenance across New York City, which really came to the fore during lockdown. The vulnerabilities of technical infrastructure became social vulnerabilities, and that starts at broadband. It goes to the different devices that you can or cannot afford, or that you have access to. For example, I have students who have their own rooms, have wonderful tech infrastructure, can come to class whenever. But I also have students who have to share the computer with their 3 siblings, or who have jobs, who live in areas where internet is very bad, very vulnerable to weather conditions, and so on. Intimacy refers to digital platforms and services providing social and economic lifelines for New Yorkers. Again, as I said, the technologies brought many public events and activities into people's homes, and platforms and interfaces could forge different forms of intimacies. But in some instances, this was really dependent on the context at hand. For example, we studied a yoga studio, and sort of doing yoga on your living room floor or wherever you are in front of a camera, that's a very intimate moment, but that intimacy is different for different communities and different spaces. And as I just said, the type of intimacy that we witnessed in the Latinx Cafe was different. Temporality refers to the shifting experiences of time that people experience. The pandemic itself was often narrated in temporally specific ways, such as points on a timeline, which could even be specific to New York City. And I just started with it. I said, you probably all remember where you were when the first lockdown was announced. And these kinds of temporal narratives are particular to a place. Very often the digital interactions were also framed according to the binary of synchronous and asynchronous. So if you are teaching, you have taught, you are learning, the difference between a synchronous interaction and an asynchronous interaction is a distinction, not the difference, is a distinction that we very often use now. Now, I said I would focus on security and safety, and let me just do that by highlighting 3 points before I shut up. First of all, safety and security are two different things, and the difference between the two is domain specific. Very broadly, we can say that security means that there is a certain state of certainty that is created in terms of a person or a thing being secure from an already articulated threat. So that's about prevention. Safety is the condition of being safe or feeling safe from hurt, harm, injury, loss. It is more about mitigation. Both of these are socially constructed. And I would say that as a sociologist, and we can talk about that later. In other words, there is something we achieve collectively. There is something we do rather than something that just is. And I want to specifically focus on safety because that was one of our elements. And I want to leave you with 3 observations from our research. Number 1, the feeling of safety often is integral to how a digital space is defined. As I said, for the Latinx open mic, having a safe celebratory space where one could be vulnerable among community, among peers, was at the core of what made that venue, that space, feel special to community members. Such safety was also what sustained the space over time, over the pandemic. The poets shared how personally invested they were in the space and how crucial the open mic events had been for their emotional well-being over the course of the lockdown and the pandemic at large. Second, the nature of feeling safe is continually changing. In what ways and under what conditions people felt safe was not stable, but changed based on individual perception, experience, and interactions. Such safety was very specific to the particular community and digital space as people brought different experiences and safety needs to digital public spaces. The gatekeepers of the digital public spaces were often acutely aware of that and worked towards creating what they perceived as a safe space. For example, we studied an EduTB council on Staten Island, and their leadership was very explicit about their desire in protecting their community members, particularly from the heightened social isolation that their members now experienced in the lockdown because of the lack of interaction with other community members. Similarly, members or moderators of very large Facebook groups in Staten Island that we studied were very aware of the ways in which their enforcement of discussion and guidelines could create a sense of safety among members. And this had a lot to do with politics. Last observation, privacy plays a role in how safety is perceived, but not a dominating one. People tended to frame privacy in terms of being or not being tracked or surveilled. Fears of tracking appeared to be heightened in the pandemic as people moved much of the social interaction online. Sometimes these issues, or the issues around digital privacy and safety, directly translated into physical safety. And there we see again the sort of morphing of digital and physical space. For example, we studied a Brooklyn running group, and for them, safety and privacy concerns related to locatability. During lockdowns, these runners had to run alone, and they shared their runs via tracking apps. And these disclose their routes and location. Using these tracking apps pose a disproportionate risk to women, and particularly women of color, whose movement in physical public space were disclosed publicly through these technologies. Being in this demographic put these women at a higher risk of assault, and having their locations in public space disclosed could potentially facilitate and plan attack, and they were very explicit about that. And I'm going to leave it at that, and I hope you looked at the Miro board. If you haven't, please do. There are also audio stories of people who narrate the experience of their pandemic, but I'm going to shut up now and leave time for questions and conversations. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Mona. And thank you for sharing that very innovative Miro board and giving us a perspective of the qualitative angle of technology and sociology. Thank you for that. I would like to open the floor to the audience. Please feel free to either unmute yourself and ask a question to our very lovely speakers today, or you can ask your questions on chat and I'll take it to the speakers. We already have a couple of questions. So there's one question for Karina. It's from Sam Emerson. Okay, the question is, could you elaborate on distinction between respectful and responsible data use? The example you gave us about tech companies sharing student data sounds a little more of an issue with responsibility than respect.
Yeah.
Especially.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much for that question, Sam. I saw that, and it's funny because I was sending questions to Rithika in advance, and that was one of the ones I thought that people might want to know more on. It's not like they're two distinct things. It's kind of like the Venn diagram overlaps with them. So, and it's a way of thinking about the way that we interact with technology. So respectful is really more about behavior. Responsible is more about kind of rules and regulations and considering potential impact, ideally in advance rather than retrospectively. But with respectful technology, as using this children's data uses as an example, respectful technology would have more transparency that would make that information available immediately in terms of how your data is going to be used. It would give you a choice. It would, from the perspective of the schools, a lot of times people who are using those educational utilities, that's what they have to do, especially when we've gone online. So there isn't a choice. So respectful would give you a choice and really like an opt-in versus an opt-out. And there would be transparency. There would be like layers of how you could interact. The third party, they're called the SDKs, which are the kind of tools that gather your data, they would just actually just not be used, or if they were used, they would be revealed. And again, you would be able to choose to not use them. Whoever designed those tools would think in advance when identity is needed, and to try to really keep the interactions anonymous as much as possible. So those are all the kind of things. And then think about like what happens when that relationship ends, like when the class is over at the end of the day or the end of the year, and what is being done with the information that they allowed you to collect. It should be returned to you. All of those things have to do with this consideration of how you would want a person, a polite stranger or a good friend, to treat you in your interactions. So it's a focus on behavior is the short answer.
Thank you for that, Karina. This is perhaps a good segue to ask a question to Mona, because the safety and respect, they go hand in hand, and they're very important. So Mona, we have a question from audience from Suparna, who wants to know, besides safety of digital space, was the relationship of participants studied too in your study?
What, I'm not sure I understand that question.
So the question is, besides safety of the digital space, was
Yeah.
relationships of participants studied too in the study that you conducted?
Do you mean the relationship between us and the people who we studied? How that became important?
I think maybe they mean the relationship between the participants with each other.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
How that was being in terms of safety?
Yes, maybe we could rephrase it and ask, like, what elements of Safety Connect were studied? Maybe that way?
Okay. So other elements of safety, if I understand correctly. Sorry, I'm not quite getting this. So there were considerations about being safe with one another in the space, for sure. So, and that became really interesting. And that links to one of the other questions in the chat, actually, when people didn't know each other and sort of made, new connections and met people in a fairly intimate digital space that they hadn't met before. And there were interesting dynamics around who wants to be visible and has their camera on in certain ways, who is not comfortable. There were interesting gender dynamics going on in terms of that visibility. But a lot of that related to how that community was kind of continually making and remaking the notion of safety. And I'm going to give you an example. There was a mutual aid group that we studied in Brooklyn. And one of the very active participants was living alone in Brooklyn, and also saw the group as a way to keep in touch with people and not be alone. And a lot of the mutual aid work that this group did was around cooking and making sure people were being fed. And so this was a Facebook group, and in the Facebook group, she disclosed that she had the virus and got a huge backlash from some of the other group members, that she hadn't said that, and that why she was still cooking, which I'm not sure she was, but that made her rethink how safe she felt in that space, which had become a very intimate space for her, where, especially given that she was alone. So her perception of safety changed, and it continued changed, and so did the people who were in that group of feeling safe. So that's a good example of how people do safety in these communities. And I'm not sure if that's the answer to your question, and I'm happy to have another go.
Thank you, Mona. I think you answered it. I was confused about asking it myself, because you brought up an example of a synagogue and a poetry cafe. So I was just thinking to myself, like, how are they interacting and how do you relate safety? Because I mean, the participants need to be observed too. So that's where the question came from.
Oh, good. Thank you for clarifying that. So yeah, I mean, I will add one thing, if I may. So there was also a steep learning curve in terms of what it means to keep these spaces safe, right? Like there were Zoom bombings, there were disruptions, there were concerns around safety. I'm sure Karina knows a whole deal more about that than I do, that continually emerged, and that made these people who are moderators take on a more active role also as people who keep others safe, who keep the door closed to certain people who kind of control who can say what in what way. And then again, that was different to many different communities, but I can just give you an anecdote outside of the research, which comes from being an educator at NYU, where, you know, there are new protocols now in terms of how you can run a public event. We have webinars versus meetings, and this is all about safety, essentially.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
explained it well, yes.
Just to add real quick, an observation. I think what's really interesting about Mona's and my presentation is that, you know, Mona's kind of talking about these two terms that are similar but different depending on how you look at them, safety and security. And I'm talking about similarly, you know, responsibility versus respect. And it's like we've taken a shift from this sort of professional lens, security, responsibility, to this kind of behind the scenes, backstage, private lens, safe, interpersonal lens, safety and you know, respect, and thinking about our engagement with digital spaces as less of a like professional tool and more of a like an interpersonal relationship. So that's just an observation that I'd be curious to hear what you think, Mona, but I think it's interesting that we both have this kind of shift.
Yeah, can I answer to that real quick?
Please do.
Okay, so I fully agree, and I will actually kind of give it a bit of a twist and say this has always been the case, right? It's just that it's now like the complexity and the sort of realization that we do technology in society, right, is something that we all actively are involved in. I think it's really come to the fore in the pandemic. I think we are now very aware of what that means, because we are all now have to do, you know, work, school, private life, family, digitally. And one of the things we say in the report very clearly, and I think that's very important to hear for technologists, is that that is a kind of labor that we all do that is uncompensated, and that helps technologies and technology companies improve their service and improve their product. We generate data, we make it work, and that is not being recognized, and it's not being compensated. And there needs to be a fundamental shift in how we think about participation as labor. I wrote about that for the MIT Tech Review, but you know, when we think about participatory design, especially when it comes to, you know, things like we want to make a space more equitable in different kinds of ways, including making it more equitable for the disability community. And there are, you know, certain things that are changing into that direction. Certain companies are changing their thinking around that. But I think that's one of the key takeaways that we can actually, you know, take from the pandemic and hopefully redesign technology design, as it were.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that, Mona. I think that also answers one of the questions we had from the audience, which was touching upon what are some of the motivating factors for people to use these digital platforms. So thank you for that. Would you like to add something more in terms of more motivation for people to use these platforms? Would you like to add something more to that? Because I think you have covered it.
I had a question. Can I ask a question to you guys? It's kind of a little off topic because I'm just, you know, gathering a lot of information about what you guys have been speaking on. And a couple of people that I'm working with on my project, we had a great idea about, you know, affordable housing and all of the stuff that we're talking about with AI and privacy and stuff like that. And if you think about the way blockchain and cryptocurrency is all in the media and everything that way. So I was thinking, would it be smart to incorporate kind of like a system of mining with affordable housing, meaning every house that we build has some type of mining rig associated with it. That way, some just regular living, just normal living, you're actually acquiring data for the blockchain, and you can actually attach some type of cryptocurrency to that. So basically, it's almost like you're living in a house that is a mining rig, but it's all based off of electrochemistry and sustainability potentially. So that's kind of the things that we've been thinking about working on, is basically trying to make like an eco-friendly coin or something like that, where every house that we build is attached to a blockchain, but is also providing data to the network, all catered towards sustainability. So how would we kind of protect that, and how would it be something that we can be more inclusive of others in? You know, it's just a thought process. I think it would be a great idea, you know, to do something like that, because even just about how people are in the house, like in the house all day, like it would be cool just to have a designated house catering towards what they do in their house. Like if there's gamers, cool, you're a gamer, boom, you have a house catered towards you playing video games, and you're acquiring currency just by literally playing your video game and being in your house. Or if you're a marketing agent or a marketer, you know what I mean? Like you can just acquire some type of currency for literally being in your house. Or if we're gonna go the eco-friendly route, we're gonna be able to potentially maybe harvest or grow some type of plant material in their house, and boom, that's another thing we can add to the blockchain. So the whole purpose is, it's like create a circular economy just by building, because it's not that everybody says we're overpopulated. I think that we're just underdeveloped. And if we do it sustainable, everybody that actually is in a house can contribute towards that sustainability by what they produce in those homes that we build. And that could be a potential solution for, you know, Section 8 or something like that, because at least we're contributing instead of just actually paying somebody to pretty much live in that house. You know what I mean? So I'm sorry, it was just a crazy, we had like this whole 3-hour conversation, like, yo, we're getting diagrams, like, yo, this might actually be a thing. So I just kind of wanted to get technologists involved in these type of conversations to start thinking about it, and how can we actually work out the kinks, because it's still in the ideation phase, but I think that this could be something huge and it might be needed.
I have a question for, I think you're Kenny, not Diana. This is a little beyond my purview, but my understanding is that those technologies have a huge environmental impact. And
Exactly.
So that's kind of the concern that I have. Like, I like what you're talking about, like these sort of conscious communities that are using alternative ways of generating income and organized around interest and, you know, dense housing and all of that. But like the flip side is the damage that those the environmental damage of those technologies, that would be my,
Exactly.
and I don't know enough about all of that, but that's just like the red flag that comes up.
Got you. And that's why, you know, we're focused on basically building biocomposite materials for building structures. So a lot of the housing that we're going to be developing is eco-friendly and it's carbon negative. So potentially we'll be able to build a house and a mining rig that's carbon negative. So I
think you should write up a proposal and, you know, circulate it and see what people think.
Okay.
We've already done that with
we have like, that's, I just added an extra element to it, because I was thinking just about, you know, the whole fact that everybody's kind of stationary in their houses, and how can we use that to the advantage. But everybody talks about, you know, crypto being, you know, damaging to the environment, of course, because everybody has these computers that are just heating up and adding carbon emissions and stuff like that. So if we can actually build computers that are carbon negative, that would be another edge. So I'm just thinking about, how about we combine, instead of having people just run mining rigs, why isn't it just incorporated in an eco-friendly house to begin with, and have all of it just be eco-friendly? And then that contributes towards that network on a better, you know, more sustainable kind of chain. And then we can coin that as another blockchain or another Bitcoin or something like that. And that's way more eco-friendly than what's going on now, because they're just people. I have friends that have tons of mining rigs, and I go in their house, I'm like, why is it so hot in here? Like, it's so hot in here. You guys got all these computers running. So it's like, if you actually,
sorry to be interrupting, Kenny, but I would love to, you know, have you and the panelists maybe take this discussion offline, because we just have 5 more minutes remaining, and then we have like some more questions. So sorry about interrupting there. We have one more question for maybe one question each from quickly from Karina and Mona. Karina, would you like to tell us about some of the efforts that Me2B has in works? Very quickly, maybe a few.
Yeah, so essentially, you know, We are, if you're interested, you just go to our website and join us. And we're a membership organization, and we're working on building this, technology specifications for respectful technology. And that is kind of what we're piloting this year. And then based on those, we'll be auditing organizations. But what's really important to us is we're me to be, is to really involve the voices of the me's, the individuals, as we build this. And we have working groups and whatnot. And so if this is something that people in this group are interested in being involved and learning more about and contributing, I just encourage you to go to the website, and there's a contact form. I think it's under services, and or you can contact me through my website. The slide deck will be up in the Me2B Alliance library soon. And so just, happy to have people reach out to me and just join our efforts. We're doing a lot of good stuff, I think.
Right. Thank you for that, Karina. We have Karina's website in the chat, so please go there and join.
And I also I put in the chat, but I want to just mention it briefly. All Tech is Human is a great group. And for those that are interested broadly in ethical and responsible technology, and they have a really vibrant Slack community. And so these kind of topics are discussed there a lot as well. So I recommend checking them out too.
All right. Thank you for that, Karina. And maybe one last question to Mona. Actually, we do have a bunch of questions in chat, but we are fascinated by the Miro board, and we really can't get enough of that. So maybe one last question where could you just tell us, what was the most surprising finding of the study? What was that? If you could say one or two, maybe.
I will say that the most surprising result was what I already said, that it's kind of digital practices are extremely local, for one. And the second surprise is that people treated these digital spaces and the kind of digital space that we're in now as a real space. So there's an expanded understanding of space really that happened, that I think is a change that won't go away. But what I will say as part of that also is that as a fairly new New Yorker, I was just really drawn in by the way in which New Yorkers kept connected to one another, in which people kept connected to one another, kept each other alive, their communities alive, the city alive, and kept doing what they were doing with such incredible ingenuity and resilience, and a real sense of still being in New York. That I found very striking. And you can also see that this little, if you go to the Miro board, there is a little drawing in the bottom right corner, which is this little sign which says "Tough times never last, but New Yorkers do." And this is actually from a photograph that I took in my neighborhood, and I sent to our graphic designer and asked them to create this little visual, which is also on the last page of the report. So it's a little love letter to the city, which is unsurprising, but I want to kind of say it again.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mona. Thank you, Karina. Thank you for both sharing two very important facets of responsible AI. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your time. Thank you, everyone, for joining the call today. Thank you for joining the event. Please go explore Mona's Miro board a little more. Please, we have the link to Karina's Me2B. Please go join there. Please also join us, Women in AI. We are an amazing community, and we work to bring lovely events and have discussions like this. So please join us, and thank you. Thank you for a very, very productive discussion.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. Yeah. Take good care, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.